Assalamu alaikum everyone and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about one key question. Should women work? With me I have Khizr Muhammad, who's our community lead, Nusayba, who's his wife, but also an e-commerce entrepreneur, Amazon FBA expert, and then we've got Sister Jennifer, who's a CEO and founder of Sisters in Business. Jazakallah khair everyone for jumping on, making the time.
Barakallah feek. Pleasure to be here.
I know, as always, Jennifer. So Jennifer, really simple question. Should women work?
In the ideal world, no. But if we're looking at society and we're looking at, the cost of living and things going in the way that they are going, then at the moment, then yes, in some households is a necessity for women to work. Things like rent, food, car and, all the other expenses that people have. Unfortunately, a one-income household, unless you're making over a certain amount a year, will not be able to cover you. Because I think people get into this wrap of, I'm making £60,000 a year, but then you get 40% tax. So actually you're not earning that much money when you after your tax and everything. So in the ideal world, no, it's not from, it's the woman is for the home and she's there to look after her home and support her husband in making sure that he can go to work and come back and be in a comfortable home. But in this world that we're living in, then women have to work.
Mr. Muhammad.
So I actually believe that when it comes to, I think we have to separate the question from working and providing, because I feel like those are two different things. I believe that women have the option to work, and even during the time of the Sahaba till now, pretty much any era that there were women who had the opportunity to work and could work and did work. Of course, from times, places, societies, some women didn't work, sometimes the majority didn't work, sometimes the norm was that women just don't work at all. But I don't think that there's anything in our Sharia that says a woman shouldn't work. That's my answer to that question.
Interesting. Do you in the hadith and from your readings, and you may say I don't know. What are the examples of women working? Do we know any?
I wish I came better prepared for this, but I know for a fact there are a hadith about sahabiyat who did work, who did sell in the markets.
There was a sister, not sure of her name, who was a market trader in the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab. There was Rufayda, who was a nurse, and she's well known for being the nurse that took care of the wounded in the battlefield. She was actually the first Sahabi, or the first woman to set up a clinic, what you'd call a makeshift clinic nowadays, next to her home. So she didn't just actually take care of the wounded, she took care of people in the society. So there are examples, even just things. What I would add was, what do you define work as? Is it building a career? Is it part-time work? Is it full-time work? Is it a hobby? What is it? I think it's easy to say women shouldn't work. I would disagree with your point as in it being ideal. I think it's a woman's choice, depending on her situation, whether she has kids, whether she doesn't have kids, her age, her timeline. There's so many different factors. So ultimately, I think it's a choice that she makes based on her situation, based on her children's needs, her husband's need. And like I said, it really depends on what you define work as. Because, for example, myself, I work as an entrepreneur. I work from home. I have very flexible hours. It's very different to maybe working a 9-to-5 job, or maybe working as something like a doctor, where it's very, very demanding. There's so much nuance there, and I actually think it's important for a woman to have something that she does for herself. Being a mother, I say this myself all the time, is more than enough. So if a woman doesn't want to do anything additional, that's fine as well. But I think it is important to sometimes have something, because at some point your children are going to grow up, and there are a lot of women who, once their children do grow up, feel a sense of emptiness, or a sense of they've lost themselves. You hear this a lot with women saying, I've lost myself in motherhood, and they don't know what to do now. Or they start to become very attached to their kids. And you get this in the Asian community a lot, where you've got mother-in-laws that are interfering in their sons or their daughters' marriages because unfortunately they don't have anything else to do. So I think it's important to have something, and like I said, it doesn't have to be a full-blown career, but something that's just for yourself. I think it's important. And going back to the Sahaba and Sahabiya, throughout times we've had many women who do things. We forget that it was women that sew, the women that homeschooled and did all of these things. These are professions, just because it wasn't technically a profession back then. But who taught the children? If there wasn't institutes like schools, who taught the children? It was community. It was you send your child to that person's house, who sewed the clothes, who baked and cooked and sold all of this stuff. It was women. So
yeah, I mean, when I speak about, so for me, working and doing something for yourself is two different things. Because I've been an at-home mum for many, many years, but I was still pursuing other things. I think there's a difference. Working for me is you're stepping outside of your home, you're going to work for someone else as a 9 to 5, a 9 to 4, whatever the hours are, and because of that, you're receiving an income. And I think that's where lines can become a bit blurred because of that income that is coming in. And for me, I agree there were women in the Prophet times that were working, that did have careers and that did do things. But when I look at even back at Khadija, may Allah be pleased with her, the amount of wealth that she had from the work that she'd done, but then she then gave that up for the Prophet and his mission. And so for me, this is what I mean by, in the ideal world, women, we shouldn't have to go outside and provide and work and bring in the income. It's the man, Allah made the man for that. And, in terms of physical capabilities, mental capabilities, there's so many different aspects of why a man is the main breadwinner at home. Whereas the dynamics that we're seeing now is that some of the women are the main breadwinners, sometimes not out of choice, but also sometimes out of choice. And this is what I mean by, in the society that we're living in, unfortunately, we can't thrive on one income households much anymore because it's not conducive. So women do have to go and work. But if you don't choose to work, you sitting at home and not doing nothing is different to, or doing something is different to having a 9 to 5. So although I agree that, it's their choice, but it's also that if you are going to be at home, that you are pursuing, whether it's knowledge, whether it's learning, whether it's teaching, there is something that you need to be doing just to be able to keep yourself up to date with skills and, other things as well.
I think that's the key point. The choice element versus having to provide and having to work. They're two very different things. Sometimes you have to do things that you don't want to do because of external circumstances. But even the example you gave of Khadija, she chose to give up. The Prophet ﷺ, Islam, there is nothing that said that she had to. For whatever reason, maybe she was older, whatever reason, she decided to give it up for the mission. At the same time, it was her wealth that supported Islam hugely as well. So I think, for me, it lies very heavily on choice. When it comes
isn't it like with Khadija radiallahu anha, she didn't really used to go out and do the trading herself, right? So she always used to appoint people to do it.
Yeah, I think when she became more successful, she was able to then, appoint the right people to go out and do it. But when we're looking at the two different times, these are two different times. Mindsets were very, very different. And this for me plays a massive part into when women are working, right? Because when you work, you come with a certain mindset, and respectfully, whether people want to accept it or not, your mindset is that you and your husband are now on the same level, and you're not. Just because you're earning, and there's a brother who put it very, very plainly to me and my husband one time, and this is where I understood the concept of a woman should be in her home. Because regardless whether the woman is working or not, you still have the responsibility of your children. So your children still come first, your home still comes first, and then you're a working parent after that. So either way, your responsibility first and foremost is inside the home. Everything else is an after effect. But then I'm also understanding that every single penny that I put into the house is a form of sadaqah jariyah. So I know that there's no pressure of me to put money into the household if I do. But then there's that understanding from the husband's point of view that Islamically, I don't have to do it, and it's a choice that I am doing. But at the same time, it's not expected of me from his mindset to have me be a working woman at the same time. And I think that's where the difference is. It's the mindset. It's where people's mind goes to when the woman is working and earning a certain amount of money and the husband then loses his job. Dynamics in the marriage changes, respect changes. All of these things do happen. And what we have to understand as women is that we have to respect the head of the house, and that is the husband. Allah has placed him as the head of the house. And sometimes these things are lost when you then become that other dominant figure alongside your husband with working and doing whatever else it is that you're doing.
Yeah, I want to go back to this like dominant point in a second, but I wanted to like just think about with the changing dynamics, particularly with the children involved. The husband can sometimes feel like, okay, I'm agreeing that a wife can work, but ultimately there is a bit of a compromise, like a stay-at-home mom full-time versus a mom that works full-time. There is going to be a difference inevitably, right? Certain things are just not possible if you're a full-time or even a part-time working mother. And so, I guess I'd love to hear perhaps from your perspective as well, Khidr, and from my perspective as well as someone whose wife works part-time. You have this kind of balancing act, and there you do lose a certain something, or do you? I don't know. I'd be interested to hear your perspectives on it as well.
I think it's really complex. Like I don't think that this is one of those questions that has a black and white answer.
Yeah.
I think like we talked about, in my opinion, like I think it's permissible for a woman to work if she wants.
Agreed.
But when we talk about that whole provision aspect of it, I think that's where the crux of the issue comes. And we accept that, look, Allah has placed the responsibility on the man to provide. But then what does this look like? How much is he supposed to provide? And what is lost if roles are like slightly renegotiated for extenuating circumstances? I think will look different depending on every couple you ask. I think I do believe the ideal is the traditional, that the man provides and that the mother is always there to at home to look after the kids and stuff. But then also it brings into question that, okay, if the children are older and they're kind of independent now, they don't want to be at home, they're out with their friends, they go to school, university, whatever, or they work, they come back, then okay, the mother's like literally got nothing to do. She might say, look, I've got nothing to do. I might as well, I'll work in a charity so I get some good deeds. Or she's like, look, I want to, say all the children are now out of the home. She's got less responsibilities at home. And she says, look, I can do the cooking and cleaning, but I've still got plenty of hours in the day. I might want to up my lifestyle. I want to have a nicer car or something, or go on more holidays. Sure. So she's like, look, we can get that bit of. So I really think that this is like such a gray area, and it's just going to look different for every couple.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think I agree with both of you that the main responsibility for a woman, no doubt, the responsibility that Allah has put on her is to take care of her children and to raise them and to, make sure that they're pious and all of their needs are taken care of. Does that necessarily mean her place is solely in the home? I don't think so. I wouldn't. I feel like not always, but it can be problematic to say that, because then you kind of restrict women to an extent. You can still be a great mother and, take care of your children and also have other, hobbies and, do other things. But providing and provision is a completely different thing, because with provision and providing, firstly, that is something that explicitly Allah says is a man's job. Doesn't mean that a woman can't contribute. Doesn't mean, sometimes depending on situations, things can't switch. But that is, the job that Allah gave to men. So providing and the pressure that comes with that, going out, like you said, going out thinking with the mindset, I have to bring this money home, is very, very different to doing it as, as a luxury. Like for myself, for example, my husband works, he brings in the money. I work because it's a luxury, because I want to work, because I want to bring extra income for myself, for my children, to support my husband if I can, so we can save up, etc., for whatever reasons I want to.
Would you work if you didn't have to?
I don't have to right now.
So work is not like a necessity.
I take that back actually, because I do and I don't. Like, obviously, as if we want to buy a house, if we want to,
sure,
survive in London, then yeah, it does come to a point where actually, yes, you do.
But it depends on what you define as a necessity, right? Like, for example, if you stopped working completely right now, you shut your business down, you sell up, like we'd still get by. Like I don't feel like anything would change. But yeah, it's that extra money that you could potentially use to up the standard of living. And I think this is a big cause for why a lot of people are working nowadays, like men and women. I feel like the standards of living have risen to a different level than was in the past, which is why it was easier considerably for a single man to run a whole family. But now, the types of bills you're paying for are increased. You've got more bills. You've now got, everyone goes on holidays. Everyone drives nicer cars and, wears certain types of clothing, designer and stuff like that. So costs have gone up as well. So I think, in the past, like my mum used to tell us in Pakistan that they would get 2 pairs of clothes a year. Like on each Eid, they would get a new set of clothes.
Sure.
And
so are you saying then that, I was thinking about this, like, if we, and I'm not saying I believe this, but if we say that, okay, the ideal is for a woman to stay at home, then surely the imperative is on couples who can't achieve that economically in whatever place they are to move to, I don't know, Ethiopia or Pakistan or, wherever, or Nottingham, for example, anywhere outside of London to make that possible. Because I think, that number can work in different contexts in different places.
But then I get that. But then if I look at it culturally, where I'm from, the men are the farmers and the women are the traders. We've been brought up to know to work. Okay? And then the women that are at home, they are the ones who are constantly bringing community together. So again, when you look at things culturally, things look different for women in different areas of the world. Yeah. In the UK, when a woman is at home, she's at home. Back where I'm from, if a woman's at home, she's home with the community. They're cooking together, they're sitting together, they're talking together. And I think this is what we're missing when we talk about the West. We don't have that community aspect. If we're talking 15, 16, almost 17 years ago, we had that community aspect. As sisters who were stay-at-home mums, there were halakas. We'll go to each other's houses and for lunches and bring food together and do all of that. Whereas now, because of the demand of what you said, like driving nicer cars, wearing nicer clothes, wanting nicer houses, the demands of the needs have got bigger. And so people have felt this pressure of, I have to go to work to provide for me to want to look a certain way. Because if we wanted to stay at a certain threshold and say, I just want to earn to survive, then anyone can do that. I think every single family should be able to, in this country anyway, can have a threshold where you can just survive. But when you are now looking at people, at your peers who are earning more, at your peers who are doing more, going on holidays, doing this and that, there's a level of not being content. And so you want to also achieve that. There's nothing wrong with achieving that. But what happens is that it also comes at a detriment of sometimes of the dynamics of the family. And I keep drawing back to the dynamics, because there has been so much upset in communities when women have gone out to work. And maybe I can only talk about for my community that, when a woman goes out to work, when she's now in an argument with her husband, and the Prophet ﷺ warned us against this, when you're now in an argument with your husband, you now start battling with your husband what you bring and what he brings and what he doesn't do against what he does do. And this is the kind of things that it can breed when you do have a woman. And it's not to say that she can't be independent. It's not to say that she can't have something that she's working on, but we also have to be very mindful that when you are creating a community of women in line of feminism and they can work and they can do what they want, then they're going to have problems in marriages and in relationships.
That leads me on to like the next question I had, which is that, if you have a woman and a man in a household working, near enough full time, both of them, then, we've all kind of agreed that the woman's, the woman has a responsibility for the house, right? There's the famous hadith of the Sahihain where it talks about the person who is looking after a flock, and the man is responsible for his family, and the woman is responsible for her children and her husband's household, is the hadith. But then the question is it unfair on, a man or a woman if, particularly the woman, if she's being told by society that she has to work, and that there's a certain amount that success is determined in a certain way, and then she has to look after the children and the household, because the man often isn't doing that. How do we I don't know, balance the books here?
I think it does. Like, I do want to first point out that, of course, we need to separate between those women that have to work.
Yeah.
Because of, for example, they're divorcees, single mums. We all know that the mother of Imam Bukhari, she was a single mum. She used to do what she could to support her son. The mother of Imam Ahmed, she was a single mother. She, I think, used to
Imam Shafi'i as well.
Imam Shafi'i as well. So, when I think we need to make it clear to the audience, we're not talking about such scenarios because they're more of a requirement, and they can't be helped. But where it comes to where it can be helped.
Also, like, my wife works part-time. Both of you, work. So we always have a certain perspective on it. We're just examining the issues that arise from it.
True. And I do think that what it does boil down to, that, of course, we need to recognize that the West has been pushing the fact for more women to work because, of course, they get double tax back. So as in the sense that if they can convince all women, which is what they did in the mid-1900s, to start working, then the 50% of the population that didn't work, they now get at least 30% of them working, and now they can collect tax revenue off of them. So they benefit from that. So, it's important to see that agenda point. And I do think that when it comes to, if a man and a woman are both working full time, I think it strongly depends on their working hours and how they're working to then determine where the renegotiation of responsibilities is. And I think that, and I believe what scholars say, that if that is the case, then it should always be equitable. And what I mean by that is that, for example, if they're both working 9 to 5 and they're both contributing to the household, then maybe cooking and cleaning needs to be redistributed evenly amongst them. Same with looking after the kids, school runs and stuff like that, because it would be unfair to say, okay, she's also providing for the house, she's also paying half the bills and stuff, but then the man's not doing anything else and she's doing everything else. That's
going back to your point on, sorry, just, do you want to go?
No, I was just about to say, and that is the imbalance of women working, is that the responsibility is still on me to prepare the children, get them to school, get dinner prepared, work, and do all of that. And that's where the imbalance comes, which is why I say that in an ideal world, a woman shouldn't have to work. And of course, it does go back to choice, but if we were living in a world where, mashallah, the mindset that you have, that it has to be shared and it has to be fair, then I don't think any woman would, or anybody would have an issue with anybody working. But it's not fair, and this is where where sometimes the problem starts from. Hence why you get that back and forth with husband and wife, and you don't do this and I do that, and it just becomes that power dynamic issue again.
Yeah. What about Nusayba, what do you think about how modern society and culture describes what a woman's role should be, and what it celebrates and doesn't celebrate, and how should a practicing Muslim woman interact with that?
I think, success for a person or for a woman is defined as, a working woman, someone who's, outside of the home. Success is defined in the West anyways, by how much money you have, by what your career choices are. But as Muslims, we know that's not the definition of success. For a mother, raising your children piously is success. So going back to your point about, a woman that has to balance all of that and feels like she has to work because she won't be successful, it goes back to mindset. And that's why I keep reiterating the word choice. If you value motherhood and you see that as successful, then you won't feel like you have to work because someone is telling you or whatever. If you do it, it's because you want to do it, or for whatever reason you feel like you want to. So I think, success is what you define it. And as Muslims, being a mother, I say this all the time, is more than enough. I was actually, on social media the other day, a sister put up a post. She was interviewing people for her business. And she just made a comment saying that, or asking what the viewers thought, but she said a lot of the women that were asked questions in the interview, when she asked them to introduce themselves, they introduced themselves with, I am a mother of X amount, I'm a mother of, 2, I'm a mother. And she thought it was interesting. She was like, why is that? And I replied and I said, because above all, for a lot of Muslim women, that's their biggest accomplishment. For me, I have no shame in, saying I am a mother of 3, and then I'm an Amazon, businesswoman, and then I'm, a madrasa teacher, and then I'm this. That's my biggest accomplishment. So it depends on where you define success. In terms of the dynamic and what you were mentioning, I definitely understand where you're coming from when it comes to a woman earning and, when it comes to arguments and this kind of power struggle. But I don't think it has to be like that. I think it can happen. But does that mean a woman shouldn't work, or does that mean you work on your marriage and you kind of, fix other issues? I don't know. I think. I
mean, I'm very old school when it comes to marriage. Marriage and thinking about marriage. I personally wouldn't do anything that will put my marriage at its detriment. So if I felt like working was compromising my marriage, I would stop working to save my marriage.
Yeah.
I'm very old school in that thinking. So I know that I'm very different. Whereas sisters these days would be more than happy to say, well, you're not really supporting what I'm doing. I'm happy to let the marriage go. And again, that comes down to my culture, that comes down to, my mindset around marriage and what marriage should look like.
But I would completely agree with that. And that goes for anything. Anything that is a detriment to your marriage, whether that's working, whether, that's something else, whether that's you studying or whatever it is, you should take into consideration, both man and woman. So I don't necessarily think, because there are going to be a lot of women who work and who maybe earn more than their husbands, and their husbands are completely fine with it.
Yeah.
There isn't, I mean, we've had this conversation multiple times where you've jokingly said, I'm waiting for the day you make more money than me. I want to see you make more money, etc. I do believe in the traditional roles, and I do think that no matter how much money I make, I would still want and expect my husband to be the provider, even if he's making less. Of course, I'm happy to support. That's a different question.
Listening to this.
No, because I do believe that comes, I do believe that Allah has given that role to men for a reason. And there is a level of respect that you have for your husband when he provides. So, I follow those traditional, I like that traditional mindset as well. But yeah, I just go back to when it comes to working, it's a choice and it depends on the time and place. Like, for example, when my children were a lot younger, I have 3 boys and, they're twins, and the little one, they were very young at the same age. It was very difficult for me to start working at that point and potentially put them in childcare, whatever. For me personally, wouldn't have been the right choice. But now that they're at school, they're a little bit older. I feel like I can, bring, flexibility into our relationship and, change the dynamic of our relationship.
An interesting point. Ibrahim, what do you think about all of this? Because I know you've been asking us for our opinions, but your wife works as well. She works part-time, right? You said. How do you view all of this?
So I think I think about it from the perspective of that hadith, right? Where ultimately, the man is in charge of his family as a whole. That includes his wife, his children. But then the wife has specific duties around the household, but also the children. That is her specific role. And I think when it comes to working, of course, the income, the earning, and the mode of earning needs to be halal and appropriate. So that's important. I think if you can fulfill your obligations to the children and to the household, and then you still have spare capacity and you can make it work, then I think that isn't an issue whatsoever. And I think for some, not all women, it's very important to work because that's just the way they are, right? And they need that time to be out of the household and to do something that they're interested or passionate about, and that ultimately then feeds back into how they are in the household and with the kids. So it can have a positive impact as well, but not all women are like that, and other women will take a lot more energy from just being mothers and educators, and that's also cool. So all in all, I think it's basically, I think what all of you are saying is like ordering the priorities, stacking the priorities, and making sure that each of them are being met. And I think the difficult bit, the balancing act here is when you have a mother who is going to, actually both ways. You have someone who's stay at home, but you don't want them to be so stay at home and so kind of chilled out that they're not like actually actively having to push themselves and go and like progress. But at the same time, someone who's working, you don't want them to be, compromising too much on, and they need to constantly keep themselves in check on that front. But that's life, isn't it? Life is a compromise that you're constantly running. So yeah, that's what I think.
Interesting take, and yeah, I pretty much agree with that. I think that when it comes to this issue, like I said in the very beginning, that I believe it's a whole load of grey. There's no black and white answer to it, and it does depend a lot on personal circumstance. But yeah, like we've got a divine order that Allah has revealed that this is the responsibility of each person, and as long as the responsibilities are being met, and it's not too much on certain people. Like there are, for example, my wife, she does her business stuff around the kids. So she makes sure she prioritizes them. But sometimes for other women that are working, it's harder to do that. And in those cases, like what do you do? Then I think that's where the couple need to sit down and talk and see, is that income necessary? Because especially with what's going on with what's being taught to kids in schools nowadays, how a lot of the reason for, I know at least from my area, that a lot of the reasons for crime in our area is that generally both mother and fathers are out of the house, they're working until 6, 7 p.m. Kids come back from school at 3, there's like no one home. So they just go out and like hang around the neighborhood. And that's obviously where they encounter a lot of like, drug dealers, the wrong kind of people, and it takes them down a spiral of negativity that can end really badly. And that's why I think there's the hikmah of having a woman or the wife there and present for her children.
Yeah, and like I experienced whenever you've got kids at home and you're working, it is a compromise, right? Inevitably, right? My son regularly makes appearances on video calls if I'm at home, and you're dealing with disasters where, like, I was trying to train my daughter to potty train recently, whilst at the same time I'll be on calls, and then she'll walk in having leaked with a number 2, and I'm like leading a call, so then I have to go off camera, on mute, whilst dealing with her, and then she'll start shouting things like, "I'm done, Baba," like switching off the mic quickly. So I think that side of it is difficult, and I feel like if a woman is completely full time at work, I don't know how sustainable that is long term, because and I guess it also depends on what, as you said, Nusayba, what a woman calls work. Because if it is like what I call work is like 9 to 6:30 and then switch on again between 9 and 11 again, right? If you do that, that's not sustainable.
Yeah, and that I would agree with as well. It really, I guess for me, I don't define that as necessarily work. I look at part-time work, flex. I mean, I guess I refer to my own work. It is a lot of work. It is a complete business. But alhamdulillah, I have the luxury where I can dedicate a whole day to work, and then the next day literally just spend entirely with my children. I'll work really hard for a couple of weeks while the kids are in school, and then in their holidays, spend time with them. So I have the luxury for that. That's why I feel like it's really difficult to say yes or no, women should or shouldn't. I think it goes back to choice, situation, and just finding a balance in your marriage and in your personal life. And I think every woman should have the right to make that decision for themselves with their family and husband, of course, but ultimately every woman will know what's best in their marriage and in their situation.
Final one or two word answer: should women work? Have a think about it. You can use any word you like. Should women work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
They can.
That was a good one.
My answer would be if they see fit.
Yeah, mine would be, you said yes or no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, okay, you can have 4 or 5 words.
If they see fit.
If they want to.
Yeah, it's the same. It's a straddle between the both, isn't it? But yeah, it's absolutely a choice.
Brilliant. Well, folks, we've resolved that one for you. Please let us know in the comments below what you thought about it. What are your thoughts about the topics discussed today? Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.